Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Hey, Matt, good to see another hat wearer. Let's go.
All right.
Matt, it's time to sign into Jessop's Journal. In this Jessop's Journal, we're being socially distanced, and thanks to Five Wise, we're doing the hand sanitizing and such. But it's interesting. This gentleman right here, his name is S.
My first name is Scott.
Yes, Matthew Jones.
That's right.
So what do you want me to call you?
Call me Matthew.
Call you Matthew. Okay, like Matt the Hat.
Matt with the hat.
Matt the Hat. Okay, now there's a reason why you and I had met, and it was just kind of funky. I had just finished doing a story that talked about origami being used in different things, and this one specifically was for a ballistic shield. But I went into my hatter because I needed to check on a hat, and I meet you. Okay, another fellow hat guy, and coming to find out that you also are I guess you'd call it a genius master in what?
Origami.
Origami. Well, geez, we got to talk.
Yeah.
So what's this thing right here?
Well, this is 1,001 cranes.
Wow.
I made it as good luck, but at the time I was an artist, kind of prolific as origami goes, and it was just a fine piece. I was selling it for quite a bit of money, but my wife, she put it even higher, so no one would buy it.
Let me guess, she didn't really want to sell it.
No, she didn't want to sell it, not at all.
There you go. Okay, well, getting back a little bit to the hats. Okay, so you're wearing a hat here. I'm wearing a hat. And as everybody knows, JW Custom Hats is my official hatter.
Nope, mine
and
too.
That's where yours were. So what's the background? I know what mine is, but why the hats for you?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I think it was when I was around 16, right? I had been able to book a show at a club,
Okay.
right? And I spent all this time trying to make an act, and I made this little devil, like a devil on your shoulder kind of thing. And I spent so much time with the paper mache, I made Lee press-on teeth, and I bought my first fedora for the show.
There you go.
Well, I got up on stage, right? And I realized while I was on stage, I don't know anything about ventriloquism. So all this planning, and I didn't even get the fundamentals of the show.
Well, but you looked good.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
I bombed, but I looked good.
Yeah.
And I've been wearing hats since.
Yeah, there you go. Well, to me, again, the whole moniker of this series is, everyone has a story.
Right.
Stories have power. They help us understand each other. So getting back to the origami a little bit.
All right.
How long have you been doing that?
Well, I started when I was about 3 years old,
Whoa,
Well, at least
serious?
my parents say, yeah.
Okay.
I think I was folding origami boulders. I was pretty good at them.
Okay.
Yeah. So it just went from there. I was never very good at reading the directions, so I just was able to visually figure it out. And I think that really helped me on trying to invent my own pieces,
Okay.
which is what I ended up doing. And then with my art, with my origami, I started painting them, and that was completely unorthodox in the origami community. In my opinion, at the time, we're just making models, right? And so I started painting them and framing them and selling them as art instead of just an instruction.
Okay.
And I became pretty popular for it. And origami these days has really boomed, especially in America. 80% of all origami these days is in America.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. So ancient Japanese art of folding paper
Right.
kind of comes over here and gets taken over a little bit. Okay. So describe some of the pieces that you've made.
One series I made that traveled around, we did a show in like New York and San Francisco, was actually based on wrought, of all things. Yeah. So I had made an origami jawbone that was to scale with kind of bugs, maggots in the background, flies. I made a tiger lily flower that was growing out of such decay.
Whoa.
And,
Have to admit, that sounds kind of cool.
yeah. I also made a spider in the series.
Okay.
Or actually, the spider is one piece of paper.
Yeah.
No cutting. And so is the spider web in the background.
Okay, now that's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so you do these elaborate pieces, and okay, I can fold paper, but I'm not really good at. I was always one of those kids that drew outside the lines. Okay, and to me, I'm looking and going, how in the world do you? Because you only fold it, you do your folds and all that kind of stuff. How in the world do you get it so that, that it turns out right? How do you have to do it over and over and over, or do you have it kind of in your mind, or how in the world do you do something like that?
Oh no, I fold all in my mind. I can visually see what's happening. And if I need to create a new thing, or if I want to, I have a series of bases, like a skeletal structure, which I might add to each other, and it's all in a visual. It's a visual thing for me, yeah.
I read somewhere that it's kind of like fractals,
yeah.
and there's a fair amount of math and geometry or something. Can you explain that a little bit more for me?
Well, sure. There's a lot of geometry in the origami, but like I said, I was never good at following the directions.
Yeah.
So I never really took that much of an interest, but people say that I do have a gift for geometry. The fractal nature of it is doing the same kind of fold and leaving like a square in each corner to be able to reproduce that fold over and over and over again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, I got to imagine that, doing big pieces of paper isn't that hard.
It's harder.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I would think these little guys would just be like insane.
Well, I got to the point where my hands were just doing it. I wasn't even looking.
Okay.
Like I could fold a crane in 18 seconds back then.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I got these big hands.
Yeah. So bigger is actually harder? Why?
Well, because you try to align up a longer fold.
Okay.
Plus, it wants to collapse on itself.
Ah.
Years ago, I did a show called Micro Macro. It was at I think it was called the Pickle Factory. It's gone now.
Yeah.
And I folded a 10-foot square of paper, and I folded a half-inch square of paper into origami. And it was the hardest thing on stage to keep the crane's head, the large one, the head from flopping down. Just kind of hold it up, flop down.
Well, now the other thing I understand is that you are a preschool teacher.
I am.
How'd you get into that?
Well, okay, originally with origami, even in the beginning, I wanted to show people and help people, And I went on to do a bunch of after-school projects and stuff like that to help kids that were in need. And then I ended up working with a few 501c3 companies, right, where I did a mentorship with a kid with Asperger's syndrome, and we did a show together. It was pretty cool because it really helps out with your long-term, short-term memory, kinesthetic ability, all these things that maybe someone with something like autism might need to take away from a good folding of paper.
Well, when you talk about autism and everything, because I've done a number of stories on autism and have some family members with that, but the way I look at it is that sometimes people seem to be afraid of things they don't understand.
Right.
And you're living with a condition that, bluntly, I don't think a lot of people even really know what it really is. So you have epilepsy?
That's right. Just like autism is a broad spectrum of smaller, you have people that just have problems looking into an eye, and then you have people that can't leave the house. It's a broad spectrum. And it's the same thing like that with epilepsy.
Okay.
Now, I have an epilepsy that's called tonic-clonic grand mal.
Okay.
It's focused oriented, meaning there's a part of my brain that just short circuits. It just too much information or too many electrical wires. So I need it grounded. I need something to a metal piece. I don't know. And that sends me into an electric, like a seizure in my brain.
Okay.
I also think that it's not 100% a detriment. I think that maybe that's how I can see the origami in my mind. Maybe I'm just wired different,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I remember, I did the story with one gal with autism, and the thing that people don't realize, especially with Asperger's, is the fact that they have hyper focus. They may not have great social skills, but they have hyper focus that can help them do some stuff. And I got to tell you right now, this would drive me. It looks gorgeous. Don't get me wrong, but I think I'd be pulling out what little hair I have left. You know, it's just like, wow.
Well, 3 months of half-inch squares. But like I said, I got to the point where I was just, and I was doing them at my work at the time, right? And I worked in a print shop for about a dozen years, doing reprography, so like blueprints.
Oh, wow.
Now, working in the blueprint industry, there was paper.
Oh, you think?
And I'm all about paper.
It's
you know?
like,
So I'd have these 36-inch by 500-foot rolls of paper for me to work with, and sometimes they get damaged, and they just say, "Hey, you want this?" And I'd be like,
heck yeah.
"Oh, I do."
Yeah. So, out of all the things that you've done, is there, and I realize this is kind of like, you know, picking your favorite kid, but what's your favorite thing to do, or one that has special meaning?
Well, when I was 11 years old, I remember we moved to Texas for a little bit, and it was the first time I heard these bugs just so loud. And I'm like, what are those, you know? And they were cicadas.
Oh.
Yeah. And they would molt their skin and leave their skins attached to the trees. Well, I took one of these skins and I just looked at it and I just stared at it and I started folding in my head. And by far, the cicada, the origami cicada that I made when I was 11 years old, is my favorite piece. And it's also one of my favorite pieces to teach. And it's very fractal.
I bet it is. Now, one of the things I look at, to me, life kind of comes with scars. So this is my journal that the folks at Rustico made.
Right.
And, you know, it's got all this pieces that they normally throw away and everything. They've got a hashtag called Leave Your Mark.
Right.
So.
Oh, you're going to ask me, aren't you?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
I'm thinking. So, S. Matthew Jones, how do you want to leave your mark?
You know, it's really hard to decide if it's a personal thing like paper or if it's the kids, you know, and I'm really going to have to say it's the children. Because after I taught all those people with different disorders, I started teaching children. And I was making decent money in the reprography field, but I really wanted to help the kids. And so I decided to become a preschool teacher. And preschool teachers really should make a living wage, and they just don't.
They don't, no. Well, you don't have very many men in it. You know, so it's kind of good to see, you know, a male role model as well.
Yeah, definitely. Especially one with a hat.
That's right. Well, with that, my fellow hat wearer, I want to thank you first for coming on today. The other thing I want to thank is, of course, you know, the folks at Five Wise are, you know, keeping us, you know,
Smells
sanitized
nice.
and everything. And then, of course, you can't have Jessop's Journal without, you know, a journal from Rustico. Then, of course, Taylor Cooperative, the guys that make sure I look good. Well, besides Ed, you know, he's always doing that. And then, of course, we got to give a shout out to JW Custom Hats. I mean,
Keeps us looking good.
that's right. So, with another entry into Jessop's Journal and S. Matthew Jones, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.